It's funny, isn't it? They keep saying that this cost of living crisis is easing. But, well, someone should tell that to my energy bills. Like, every time I look, the price of just heating my flat is going up and up. And here's the thing that really gets me. The UK has some of the highest energy prices. Out of all the developed countries, we're talking higher than many of our European neighbors. And it's not like we're some tiny economy. I mean, think about it. We saw that YouGov poll. Almost a quarter of people are avoiding turning on their heat on most days. So in this deep dive, we're going to try and understand why our energy bills are causing us so much pain, and what, if anything, can be done about it.
Yeah, it's a complex issue for sure, but a lot of it comes down to how energy prices are actually set in the UK, particularly this thing called the energy price cap.
Most people are probably familiar with the energy price cap, but for those who aren't, it's basically a limit on how much energy suppliers can charge you per unit of gas or electricity. It's set by Ofgem on behalf of the government, and it's meant to protect consumers from those really extreme price hikes. The problem is, though, the cap itself has been anything but stable over the past few years. In 2021, it rose by 12%, which was already a bit of a shock, frankly. But then in April 2022, it jumped by a massive 54%. And get this, it was on track to go up by a crazy 80% that October before the government stepped in and limited the increase to 27%. But even with that intervention, prices are still way higher than they were just a couple of years ago.
Exactly. And to really get why that is, you have to get the workings of the wholesale energy market. It's essentially where energy suppliers buy the electricity and gas they sell to us, the consumers.
So walk us through this wholesale energy market. What's happening behind the scenes that's driving these prices up?
So imagine this. Unlike a lot of other commodities, energy is really hard to store in large quantities. This means there needs to be this constant balancing act to make sure that supply and demand are always, in sync. That's where the electricity system operator, or ESO, comes in. They're the ones responsible for keeping the entire electricity grid stable. Think of them as the coordinators, making sure the lights stay on even when the mix of energy sources is changing throughout the day.
Okay, so the ESO is the conductor of an orchestra, making sure everyone's playing in time. But where does the actual buying and selling of energy take place?
That happens in what are called wholesale market auctions. And these auctions occur every 30 minutes. The various energy generators, whether it's wind farms, gas-fired power stations, nuclear plants, whatever they're able, they all offer their energy at different prices, based on their production costs. For instance, just earlier today, the wholesale price was £19.94 per megawatt hour. A megawatt hour, just so you know, is roughly the amount of electricity an average UK home uses in about 2 months. At that point, 44.1% of the electricity being generated was coming from wind, and 36.5% from gas power stations.
Hold on. Didn't you say that wind energy is usually much cheaper to produce than gas? If almost half of our electricity was coming from wind, why were prices still so high? Something doesn't seem right here.
And that's where we run into one of the most interesting parts of the UK energy system. It's called marginal cost pricing. It's a big reason why the UK often ends up with these higher electricity prices, compared to lots of other countries. Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me, what is this marginal cost pricing all about? Simply put, the price you pay for electricity isn't based on the average cost of all the different sources. Instead, it's set by the most expensive source of energy, needed to meet demand at any given time. So even if we're using tons of cheap wind energy, if even a little bit of that pricey gas power is needed to meet peak demand, you know what? Everyone ends up paying that higher gas price.
So even when we're benefiting from that cheap, clean wind power, we're still stuck paying the price of the most expensive source. That seems, a bit counterintuitive, to say the least.
It definitely raises some eyebrows. And there are good arguments, both for and against this system.
Okay, so let's get into those arguments then. What are the pros and cons of this marginal cost pricing model?
People who like marginal cost pricing say it encourages investment in low-carbon energy sources. The idea is that by paying these producers a higher price, even when their costs are lower, it makes them want to build more wind farms, solar installations, that sort of thing.
So it's like we're all kind of chipping in to speed up the move to cleaner energy. That makes sense, I guess.
Yeah. But like always, the reality is a bit more complicated. See, the UK government also uses these things called contracts for difference. These contracts basically guarantee a minimum price for certain renewable energy projects. If the market price drops below that guaranteed level, the government makes up the difference. But if the market price goes above the guaranteed level, the renewable energy project has to pay some of that back to the government.
Ah, so it works both ways.
Exactly. And that can actually make some investors less interested in renewable energy projects. They know their profits are going to be limited, so they might not want to take the risk.
So it's not as simple as it seemed at first?
Nope. And ultimately, the UK's reliance on gas is the main reason for those high energy prices. It makes us really different from some of our European neighbors. For example, industrial electricity prices here in the UK, they're about 50% higher than the European average. It's about 2.85 pence per kilowatt hour. But France and Germany, which have invested heavily in nuclear and other sources, pay around 1.7 pence per kilowatt hour. It's a big difference.
Wow, 1.7 pence compared to 2.85 pence. That really adds up for businesses, and I bet it affects us regular consumers too. So what can we do? Are we stuck with this marginal cost pricing and these crazy energy bills forever?
Not necessarily. There are more and more people who want to change the system. Some say marginal cost pricing is actually hurting consumers and we should just get rid of it. Others think investing more in low-carbon energy, especially nuclear power, could help us rely less on gas and bring prices down, even with the current system.
It's interesting you mentioned nuclear power. We did a whole deep dive on that a while back. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can check out that episode in our archive. Just to recap, the basic idea is that more nuclear power could give us a stable, low-carbon energy source, one that wouldn't be affected by the ups and downs of the gas market.
Right, that stability is really important. Nuclear power plants can make electricity all the time. It doesn't matter if the wind's blowing or the sun's shining. That makes them really valuable for a low-carbon energy system.
But of course, nuclear power has its own issues, like waste disposal and what people think of it.
Absolutely. It costs a lot to build new nuclear plants, and it takes a long time to build them. So it's a big commitment financially and in terms of logistics.
And that raises a big question. Does the current government actually want to make this energy transition happen? And do they have the resources for it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It takes long-term vision and a real commitment to investing in our energy infrastructure.
So it feels like we're at a crossroads. We've got a system that's clearly not working for consumers, but changing it would take bold action and navigating some tricky trade-offs. What do you think will happen?
Well, the UK is facing this, like double challenge, meeting our climate goals, but also making sure energy is affordable for everyone. It's tough. And there are no simple answers, really.
It's easy to see why people are so frustrated, right? They're being asked to use less energy and pay more for it, all while these big energy companies are making, record profits.
Yeah, it feels like the burden of going green isn't being shared fairly. So the question is, will the government be willing to take on these powerful energy companies and actually make those big changes some experts are calling for? Or will they just focus on the economy in the short term, rather than the planet and people's well-being in the long term?
Those are the stakes, yeah.
Oh.
And I wish we had a crystal ball, but we don't.
But what we can do is stay informed, right? And be part of these conversations and hold our politicians accountable. The choices we make now will affect the UK's energy for a long time to come.
So to sum up, if you're feeling overwhelmed by those energy bills, you're definitely not alone. It's a tough situation, no easy answers, but hopefully by understanding how we got here, the different forces at play and the possible solutions, we can start demanding a better, more sustainable energy future for the UK.
Absolutely. Remember, this conversation is still going on. There are new technologies coming out all the time. More people are becoming aware of the issue, and the political landscape is always changing. So stay curious, stay engaged, and let's keep pushing for a fairer, more sustainable energy system for everyone.
Great points. And that's a really good note to wrap things up on. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today. I think we've all learned a lot about how the UK's energy system works and the challenges we're facing as we try to create a future where energy is both sustainable and affordable.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, this conversation needs to keep going. The more we talk about this stuff, the better decisions we can make, and the better chance we have of making sure everyone has access to clean, reliable, and affordable energy.
Couldn't agree more. So, to our listeners, stay curious, stay involved, and let's keep working together to build a brighter energy future for everyone.